Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jew Godfather's Kosher Nostra Podcast. I am your host, Jew Godfather, and welcome. Now, you, my generous listeners, are most likely wondering, what is this podcast about? Why do I call myself Jew Godfather? Why is this podcast called the Kosher Nostra? Well, I'm glad you all asked those questions. Well, let's start with the first question, which is, what is this podcast about? Well, in this podcast, we will be discussing or educating you, the audience, on Jewish history, culture, mythology, beliefs, cuisine, our allies, historical figures, and their many hardships of the Jewish people. However, I am doing a class project, so for this college project, for the first couple of episodes, we will be talking about how perpetrators, or the Nazis and their collaborators, escaped justice by fleeing to various countries. There were some Nazi collaborators who faced justice, but many escaped, finding refuge in countries that served as major havens or hideouts for Nazis and or collaborators responsible for the Holocaust, or the Shoah as it is known in Hebrew. I will discuss who these Nazis and or collaborators are, what they did, how they escaped justice for their crimes after World War II, and if they lived out their lives never facing justice for their crimes or were eventually captured by Nazi hunters like the famous Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal, and or were captured and killed by Israel's Mossad. Now on to the second question. Now, time for the second question. Why do I call myself Jew Godfather? Well, first reason is because of safety and privacy concerns, since I don't want any jihadists and or Nazi sympathizing seamen swallowing cocksuckers coming after me trying to kill me, especially according to the ADL, or Anti-Defamation League, from a survey from January 14, 2025, says nearly half of all people worldwide hold anti-Semitic attitudes. So yeah, that's a scary thing to deal with. Reason number 2, aside from me not using my real name to avoid being targeted by anti-Semites, I also use it because I'm of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. My ancestor, whose name was Abe, came from Bavaria, Germany in the late 1880s to North America. Abe was a Jewish businessman who spoke Yiddish, which is a language used by European Jews. Reason number 3 is because I was inspired by both history and fiction to use the name Jew Godfather. Now, the historical part comes from a Jewish gangster named Meyer Lansky, who lived from 1902 to 1983, who was considered one of the most powerful and richest of U.S. crime syndicate chiefs and bankers, according to Britannica. Also, I like the movie The Godfather from 1972, which was based off of the 1969 novel by the same name, written by Mario Puzo. So, inspired by both Meyer Lansky and The Godfather, I took on the name The Jew Godfather. Okay, with that out of the way, on to question 3. Now, on to the third and final question for this whole introduction into my podcast, which is, why do I call this podcast Kosher Nostra? Well, that answer should be easy. You see, the term Kosher Nostra is a play on the Italian phrase Cosa Nostra, which means our thing, and refers to the Sicilian mafia. The word Cosa was replaced with the word kosher, which is a Yiddish word that refers to the Jewish dietary laws. So, Kosher Nostra refers to Jewish organized crime. I also thought it would be a fitting name since I would be talking about how Nazis escaped justice. But in America there were also Nazis or Nazi sympathizers, like the German-American Bund during the 1930s and 1940s, spreading anti-Semitic propaganda and conspiracy theories. Fritz Kuhn was the leader of the German-American Bund. Here's a picture of him at Madison Square Garden, New York on February 20th, 1939, and he also met Adolf Hitler in 1936. Despite them being a neo-Nazi group, there wasn't anything to be done, since they hadn't broken any federal laws, and they wouldn't be made illegal until December 8th, 1941, when the U.S. entered the war. A former U.S. congressman and judge named Nathan David Perlman brought this to Meyer Lansky's attention. Since there wasn't anything other than investigating that could be legally done, Nathan David Perlman wanted Meyer Lansky and others to put a stop to these Nazi sympathizers, saying, and I quote, "You got some boys who might want to punch a Nazi." Meyer Lansky responded, saying respectfully, "You understand we can do better than punch." Perlman wanted the neo-Nazis injured, not killed, since that was considered poor public relations. And Meyer Lansky said later, "Don't worry, we'll marinate 'em, we won't ice 'em." On April 20th, 1938, Jewish gangsters brought their fists and baseball bats and beat them till, according to the New York Post, the Nazis lay unconscious, others suffered compound fractures of the limbs. This became known as the Battle of Yorkville, according to All That's Interesting. Soon Jewish mobsters elsewhere would also fight Nazis, like Amber Longy Zillman of Newark, New Jersey, who recruited boxers to fight the neo-Nazis. The boxers were called the Newark Minutemen, who was led by Nat Arno, a Jewish former professional boxer. Also in Chicago, Jewish mobster Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, who was notified by both Perlman and Lansky about the neo-Nazis. So Guzik assembled his group of Jewish boxers to take on the neo-Nazis. Another Jewish mobster, Mickey Cohen, also got involved, and he bashed the heads of neo-Nazis together, according to Tablet magazine. So in this way, the gangsters were the good guys. You can check out more about this subject through the articles I previously mentioned, or you can buy the book Gangsters vs. Nazis, written by author Michael Benson, which is available on Amazon. You can also see its depiction in the 2021 film Lansky, starring Harvey Keitel as Meyer Lansky. So anyway, that's the entire reason why I named it the Kosher Nostra Podcast, since Jewish mobsters beat the shit out of Nazis like they should, which is cool. Now, on to what you can expect to see in the next episode, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, in the next episode, we will be discussing Nazis that escaped, starting with those that were let in to North America after the war. We will also discuss other countries that served as major havens or hideouts for Nazis, like South America, Egypt, and Syria, Canada, Australia, USSR, the United Kingdom, and we may discuss other Nazis who escaped to other places, and some Nazis who died during the war never facing justice, or are just still missing. I hope you all have the best to look forward to, and I thank you all for listening. Sei gesund.